P.T. Barnum, along with his business partner, James Anthony Bailey, ran what is arguably the most well-known traditional circus that ever existed. It was founded in 1907. But during that era, the Barnum Bailey Circus wasn't the only circus in existence. One of the lesser-known circuses of that time was founded by British showman Frank Fillis. He had a circus company that toured throughout most of the world, but focused mainly on the United Kingdom and the colonies of the British Empire. And it was in one of those colonies, South Africa, where he came up with the idea of an exhibition that he would name Savage South Africa. He brought the act to England in 1899, 8 years before the Barnum Bailey Circus ever existed. But this story isn't about Frank Fillis or his circus. It's about one of his South African circus performers and the dreadful relationship that he had with a Cornish piano teacher who was in over her head where he was concerned. Peter Lobengula and Florence Jewell. If anyone from that time period wanted to make a case against interracial marriages, they needed to only look to this couple's shenanigans as anecdotal evidence to prove their point. This relationship was so bad and so scandalous, just the way we like it here. Let's get into it. But first, if you like these videos about the most scandalous people from yesteryear who make the hot mess history with Ty Said What Ty Said channel a time capsule for the culture, subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you can know every time that I upload one of these videos or every time that I live stream, and comment "I subscribed" in the comment section so that I can say hello to you. Now, onto why you are here. When Florence Jewell bought her ticket to the Savage South Africa show, she was just expecting to see some Africans, being all African and stuff. I mean, in a nutshell, that's what the exhibition was. Africans on display, dancing, reenacting choreographed war battles, and just living in makeshift huts that were said to resemble their natural habitat. All for people to view, much like a zoo exhibit. Nevertheless, she just wanted to see a show. She wasn't expecting to fall in love. But you never know when love is gonna hit ya. She would soon find out that you never know when Peter Lobengula is gonna hit ya either. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Florence Jewell, who also went by the name Kitty as a nickname, was a piano teacher. She was the daughter of a mining engineer, so her background was considered to be respectable by the standards of her time, or at least the aspects of her background that she shared with people. When she went to experience the spectacle called Savage South Africa, she met the star performer and fell in love with him. He was Peter Lobengula. In the show, he was touted as a prince, the son of Lobengula, king of the Matabele. In Kitty's eyes, the notion that he was a prince, royalty, was likely a big plus for her. And while Peter was likely the son of the king, calling him a prince might have been a stretch. Peter's father was a king, but his mother was not a queen. She was said to be one of his father's concubines, making him more the king's bastard than the next in line to the throne. Regardless, Peter moved into Kitty's very humble abode, a single room that she rented. Then the couple started to plan to get married, and the city of London wasn't having it. Now, this was the turn of the century, going into the year 1900. So it goes without saying that negative racial stereotypes about black people were out in the open and easy to find. But unfortunately for Kitty, her bootleg African prince would end up living up to many of those negative stereotypes before their short marriage was over. Heck, even before it began. Ben Shepherd wrote a book about this tragic romance. It is called Kitty and the Prince. He called this relationship between Kitty and Peter the beginning of tabloid journalism, and his claim makes a lot of sense because the newspapers of that day had plenty to say about Kitty and the Prince. The evening news called Peter a dusky savage. That's dusky, not dusty, y'all. The Daily Mail said that Kitty's behavior would lead to the downfall of the British Empire. Yes, these nuptials were such a big deal that the press was involved, and they were not on the side of the interracial couple. Usually just before a wedding, the bride gets cold feet. But before the marriage service, it was actually the reverend who got cold feet and made up an excuse to not marry the pair. He said that he couldn't marry the couple because Peter, being African and all, probably had other wives he left behind in Africa because he was African. And apparently that's what they do. So their first attempt at getting married failed, as is evidenced by this cancelled entry in the parish records that can be found in Ben Shepherd's book. Their second attempt at getting married worked. It was a low-profile, low-budget affair at the Holborn Register office on February 28, 1900. It didn't get any media attention, but it didn't take long for this union to get back into the newspapers. Shortly after they wed, Katie staged a suicide attempt in an effort to get away from her husband. She left some of her belongings and a letter addressed to her husband, detailing his horrible character on the banks of the Manchester Ship Canal. Actually, throughout the course of their relatively short marriage, Kitty wrote a number of letters to her husband that were reproduced in the newspapers of that time in England and as far away as Australia. She referred to Peter as Black Chops in her letters. How cute. Oh, Black Chops, why, oh why must you be so horrid? Well, you know what they say. Once you go black, you never go back. Kitty said in response to that, well, hold up, not so fast. Remember, the couple got married in February of 1900. Well, by November of 1901, Kitty had filed for divorce. In her November 4th divorce petition, she accused Peter of adultery with not one, but 2 other women. She also accused him of assault, stating that he bit her, kicked her, gave her 2 black eyes, and tried to stab her with a spear called an assegai. That's a spear made from a tree by the same name that yields hard timber. His was probably a prop that he kept from his circus act. To say that all of these allegations were pretty bad is an understatement, but Kitty's accusations in the divorce decree have widely been accepted as truth because Peter didn't defend any of them, not one. And the press was all over this story like white on rice, pun fully intended. So, many of the publications that had said that their marriage of mixed races was a bad idea from the start used Katie's divorce filing as an opportunity to say, I told you so, and double down on their stances against interracial marriage, warning white women against marrying Africans, letting them know that when African men treated them badly, the white women would only have themselves to blame because after the details of the Lobengula marriage, the truth was out about how African men are. After Kitty left the courthouse when the divorce was finalized in February of 1902, she went off the grid. There is no record of where she lived after that or when she died. In the 1911 census, Kitty's mother, Frances, is listed as a 69-year-old widow with 4 children, one of which is dead. There is no clear-cut evidence to prove it, but some suspect that Kitty's mother was saying that Kitty was dead, as in dead to her, for marrying a black man. While I can't prove that theory, I can say that it makes sense, because when Kitty and Peter were initially being covered in newspapers before they got married, Kitty's mother would tell reporters that Kitty was with Peter because she was insane. She was definitely against their union. What do you think happened to Kitty after divorce court? Did she die? Did she assume another name and take up a new life? Maybe move to some far-off place where no one knew her? We can only guess. But put your guesses in the comment section. I'd love to read them. We can't know the answer for sure. But what we do know is that in the very short span of time, starting when Katie met Peter until they divorced, a lot happened between the couple, and most of it was bad, and a great deal of it was covered by the press. Here are some of the details that I pulled from a few articles about just one of those many horrible incidents. This 1899 article in the Taunton Courier tells of Peter living off of Katie, stealing money from her, and physically assaulting her. It's called The Black Scandal, and mentions that Peter had stolen 5 pounds from Kitty at the time of this particular arrest. I have to be specific because he was arrested multiple times, including the time that he had previously stolen 10 pounds from Kitty on another occasion. She let the police know that she was paying their way, but it seems that Peter still needed his own spending money. During this messy moment, Peter made his own report to the police. He let them know that Kitty had another man in their room. That is, the room that they were renting to live. They were poor. Anyway, the part that he left out of his complaint was that she called a man into the rented room to protect her from Peter. When the strange protector saw Peter bite Kitty's thumb, he struck Peter on the head. After that, Kitty tried to kill Peter, according to him. You know, normal couple stuff. This happened in December of 1899. These two got married 2 months after this crazy incident. This article that was published just a few days later in the Tribune gives a few more details on this little spat. In addition to everything that you just heard from the Taunton Courier, this article exposes that Peter had not had any occupation at all since he left the circus, and the money that Kitty was using to keep her African prince was money that her father had left for her. Kitty was trying to hide the money from Peter and ration it out as needed, so she kept it on a chair under a stack of newspapers. Side note, this isn't disclosed in the article, but I think that I know why Kitty picked that particular hiding spot for the money. Peter couldn't read, so why would he ever need to go fumbling through a stack of newspapers? Nice try, Kitty. Back to the messy newspaper article. Peter took more from Kitty than just money on that night. There was a watch that she kept under her pillow. Does it sound to you like she didn't trust him with any of her possessions? That's what it sounds like to me. Anyway, when she woke up, that watch, the money, and Peter were all gone. Kitty must have been a pretty hard sleeper if she slept through Peter removing a watch from under her pillow. Now, technically, the watch was Peter's, but he had pawned it to get some cash, and Kitty paid to get it back. When he returned to their rented room in police custody, he gave her back the watch and some change from the money that he stole. It was at that time that Peter fessed up to having stolen an extra 10 pounds from her pocket that she didn't even realize was gone. Peter claimed that all that he wanted was 2 pounds, but since Kitty didn't give it to him, he took more than 2 pounds. Don't they always want $2? Seriously. So before everything came to a head with Peter assaulting Kitty, she was arranging a solo trip to Paris for 1 week. He wanted her to leave him with 100 pounds while she was gone. For the sake of perspective, that is the equivalent of just over 13,000 pounds today in 2022. That's a lot of money for a jobless dude to have while his lady who provides for him is out of town. Which is why Kitty told him she would pay all of their expenses before she left and leave him with 10 pounds for the week. Well, Peter didn't like that answer, and that's when he started stealing her stuff. His actions sound like those of modern-day drug addicts, and their whole situation sounds like a scenario worthy of The Maury Show or Jerry Springer. A newspaper called The Cornishman also wrote about the same story 5 days later, in much less detail, but I do think that the title of their story is worth sharing. The Cornish Girl and Her Dusky Lover. Dusky was an insulting word used to describe dark-skinned people in that era. Anyway, There were many more articles about this couple and their arguments and fights and Peter getting arrested and making trouble. But I have no interest in making a feature film length video about these two bozos, so we'll move on. It seems that maybe karma caught up to Peter for how badly he treated Kitty. He ended up marrying again, an Irish woman. They lived in Salford and he worked low-paying, menial jobs for the rest of his life. He had 4 children with his wife, and 3 of them died young. His oldest, who he named after himself, lived until 1977 and had no children of his own. Peter died at the young age of 38, taking to his grave the secrets of his true identity. There were always questions. Was he an imposter? Was he just an actor playing a character in Frank Fillis' circus? Was there any chance that he was an actual prince? Was he just a son of one of King Lobengula's concubines? It seems odd to me that a man who was virtually the crown prince of a kingdom would leave it all behind to join the circus. But was Peter the only one keeping secrets about his true identity? Kitty met Peter at the end of the Victorian age, and those principles certainly would have shaped her existence. And if a woman needed to be anything in the Victorian era, it was respectable. And because of Kitty's family history, she likely wasn't deemed respectable. This would have explained her need to choose a black man in the first place. The white men of her time wanted no parts of her. Here's why. These issues might not seem like much in present times, but Kitty's sister, Emily, was a 2-time divorcee. That's a pretty big deal for the 1890s. When Emily's husband filed for divorce in 1895, he named Louis-Philippe Robert Duc d'Orléans as a co-correspondent. Louis-Philippe at the time was the crown prince of France, so it seems that Emily's husband wanted a divorce because she was fooling around with a French prince. Now, this is just speculation on my part, but sibling rivalry is a real thing. Maybe part of the reason for Kitty's pursuit of Peter was the thought of his being a prince too. Perhaps getting in that relationship was a bad attempt at eclipsing her sister. You know, you can be the mistress to a prince, but I can be the wife to a prince. Just a thought of mine. Then there was Kitty's brother, Joseph, whose actions got in the way of her being labeled as respectable. In 1893, at the Old Bailey courthouse, he was found guilty of deception and fraud and had to serve 18 months hard labor for his crime. Now, even though the actions of Kitty's siblings were not her own, she didn't get a pass. Girls who wanted to be married to good men in the Victorian era needed to come from good families. So, by that standard, she was not respectable because her family wasn't. And the fact that she and Peter lived together before they got married was a huge strike against her personally. That would have been the case even if Peter had been a white man. Women just weren't supposed to shack up. So maybe in some way, she was using Peter as much as Peter was using her. She just had more immediate consequences to pay because of his abuse. Oh well, in the end, perhaps Kitty should have known that if you pick up a guy from the circus, there's a chance that he could be a clown. Do you know who else married a guy who didn't tell the whole truth about himself, and he ended up being an abusive husband to her? Dorothy Dandridge. I published a video about that horrible story that you can see here. I will also leave a link to it in the description box. My sources for this story are The History Bucket, OurMigrationStory.org.uk, Kitty and the Prince by Ben Shepherd, The Leavenworth Times Archives 1913, Taunton Courier Archives 1899, The Tribune Archives 1899, and The Cornishman Archives 1899. If you want text notifications, so that you can get a text 15 minutes before I release a video or 15 minutes before I live stream, simply send a text to 786-632-2135 to let me know that you want text, and you will get an outgoing text message 15 minutes before I have a new video release. If you have a business, product, service, YouTube channel, or social media account that you would like to promote on my channel, email me at taiwan@taisaidwhattaisaid.com to get rates for advertising on my community tab, my live streams, and or my edited videos, just like this one. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Tai Said What Tai Said channel. Please leave a thumbs up and comment so that we can get a discussion going. And share this video on all of your social media, especially your Facebook. That really helps me out a lot. And subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you can know when my next video is ready for you. And if you don't like what I'm saying, but you love it, feel free to hit that applaud button just below your video screen there and send me some
donations.
Yeah, baby. See you on the next video.